Please welcome to the stage Richard Inglis, Field Assessment Manager at Vector Limited, New Zealand. Sam DeLuca, Work Methods Apprentice Advisor, PLT at NMAX, Canada. Sarah Bull, Senior Supervisor, Electric Field Operations at Eversource Energy, United States. Janeri Gomez, Line Worker at Eversource Energy, United States. Moderated by Steve Mitnick, Executive Editor at Public Utility Fortnightly, United States.
Welcome, everyone, to this session of the 7th Annual Global Electrification Forum in the Edison Electric Institute's 90th anniversary year. We have a tremendous panel, a really exciting panel for this session, which is called Who Keeps the Lights On Before, During, and After Extreme Events. And we have 4 really tremendous people that are on the front lines across the globe. I'm just going to do a very quick introduction and then have them say something about themselves. First is I want to call out Richard Inglis, and he's from a ways away. I'm from Brooklyn, but he's from New Zealand, from Vector Limited. Richard, why don't you just say a word about yourself?
So I've been in the industry 37 years. So I started as a cable layer, went right through the ranks, line mechanic, glove and barrier, doing all the live line work. Back at Vector, I went into the training school for 7 years, so I did a bit of training as well as an instructor. And back at Vector now, my role is field assessment manager. So I've got a group of guys that go out and monitor our contactors and make sure we're sticking to health and safety, doing all that sort of stuff in the field.
Great. Well, thank you, Richard. And then our second panelist is a little closer, Sam DeLuca. And Sam is from NMAX in Canada, which is up there, but pretty close. Sam, say a word about yourself.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. Sam DeLuca, work at NMAX Power. So we do a lot of distribution and network here in Calgary and Alberta. So I've been with NMAX for 15 years. I started pretty similarly. I started as a laborer with NMAX when I was 19 and then kind of worked my way up through the ranks and tried out for the apprenticeship, did my apprenticeship, was a journeyman, and now I work in the training department. I kind of specialize in the apprentice development side of things, so dealing with the apprentices, and it's been really good.
Great. Okay, thanks, Sam, Richard and Sam. Now, just a little bit closer to home, we have 2 guests from Eversource, which is the New England utility. And first, how about Sarah Bull? You want to say, Sarah, a word about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having us. I'm Sarah. I've been working at Eversource for about 4 years now. Beforehand, I was in the U.S. Navy, so I did 7 years of active duty, came out of that, found a job at Eversource because it seemed like the skills would apply, and they have. So I'm one of the electric field operations supervisors here. On normal day-to-day, I work with the underground. During storms, they'll throw us in the roles with the overhead, and so far it's going pretty good.
Oh, that's great. Okay, and our 4th panelist is also from Eversource, Janeri Gomez. Janeri, say a word about yourself too.
Hey there, yeah, this is Janeri Gomez. So my story is a little different. Born and raised in Boston, went to a tech folk school, almost became a carpenter, decided to go to college, take up an office job, and quickly learned that wasn't for me, which led me to Eversource. And I've been here for about 5 years. I just finished my apprenticeship, so officially a hot stick line worker, and it's been great.
Okay, so now let's get into this. Janeri and everybody, let's get into this. So the first general question we want to ask is, what should the industry generally, there's a lot of people watching this and at this conference at all levels of utilities, of the utility and energy world. what should they know about frontline workers like yourselves and the people you work with? And let's keep with that order. How about Richard? What should the industry know about what you all do?
I think for the line workers, we're the coalface, we have a lot of customer interaction and things like that, and it's just giving us the right skills and knowledge to be able to interact, because when there's issues out on site, we're the first people that cop it, especially for people that their power might be off for a while, so they're getting a little bit frustrated, and it's just that frontline training. We've actually done a bit here, obviously with COVID, and there's been a lot of frustration around. We've found that people out in the streets aren't quite as forgiving as they used to be. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're the face of the companies that we're working for, and yeah, a lot of the interaction it starts with us. So I think just having that awareness about we're out there, we're doing it. Let's have a bit of a support and just make sure everything's going sweet for us. Make it easier out in the job.
Okay, so we know that New Zealanders aren't too much more patient to get their electricity back on than Americans and Canadians. Okay, Sam, everybody knows how nice Canadians are. So what do you want the industry to know about, from your perspective and the folks you work with that are on the front lines, including in tough situations in Western Canada?
Yeah, I think pretty similarly too. Like, we are the first ones to be out there when the power's out and have to talk with the customers and explain what's going on. A lot of the time, it's a lot of billing questions too, like, hey, why is my bill so high? And it's like, well, I'm not 100% sure why it's so high. I'm kind of the one fixing it. But so we deal with that stuff. And I think it's just like knowing that we are trying our best to put the power back on, but having to do it safely too is a big one. We do a lot of live line work here as well, which means we don't have a ton of power outages if we don't have to. But I think just, having some patience when the power's out, because we're trying our best. Everyone probably globally is trying their best to do it. Plus we have to think about the safety of the crews in the field too.
Yeah. Now let's turn to Sarah in New England. Now, I know, being at Fenway Park from time to time, folks up your way, they don't have much patience. But they probably want their electricity back on whenever there's a winter storm, for example. So what do you want the industry to know about what you all do and the folks that you work with?
I think everyone's pretty much nailed the main thing on the head with patience. Everything is very dangerous. Things are moving quickly. You've got multiple crews. We'll bring in contractor crews. So you have hundreds, thousands of folks that are out in the field, all working on systems that are interconnected. So making sure that communication through whoever is in, the dispatch center that's dispatching those crews and updating notes. We have a computer system, and we'll have multiple centers set up during a storm. And I just think it's critical that everyone is trained, knowledgeable, and able to communicate effectively to the folks that are out in the field, because you're sitting in the room trying to tell someone where they need to go, what device they need to look at, where the trouble is. And you have the computer screen, you can pull up the sketch, you can pull up, the circuit, the one line, and sometimes it's not always available to those that are in the field. We actually have iPads now that are making those more available, but especially during storm, things are constantly changing. So making sure crews have accurate updates to what's going on, and then translating that over to make sure the customers are informed as well.
And you, Jennery, I love what you said about how you tried office work for a while. Maybe that wasn't your type. So no. So what about, what do you want the industry to know, including a lot of people like me that sit in cushy offices when it's snowing out and so forth? What do you want them to know about what you and your colleagues, your folks do?
Yeah, so obviously working on high voltage power lines is very dangerous. So we have to take special care with planning out the work. And so patience is key, especially during storms. So if we communicate this to our communities and our team, then and we work together, then we can, we'd all be on the same page, and we'd all be one big happy family, I guess. But yeah, it's challenging but rewarding at the same time. We just gotta keep at it, and we'll get there one way or another.
Now, Richard, the next question for everyone, Richard first, is what's a typical day like? Which is kind of a weird question for you all, because a typical day, so I want you to say what's a typical, easy day, like there's no, 80-mile-per-hour winds coming through. And then what's a typical bad day? So Richard, you're first.
So a typical day is your job's planned, you've got your job packed, you load your truck up, your job might be change a pole or change a switch, so you've organised your crew, you head to site, traffic management set up, you organise all your tools, check all your gear, go through all your gear, start the job, rotate through your crew during the day, finish the job, sign it all off, do all your as-built, amble back to the yard, get ready for the next day. When the storms erupt, it's like, especially recently for us, we had the cyclone Gabrielle down here. We had 60 hours of wind for 3 days, which we've never had before. Normally we get 4 or 5 hours of wind and then it dies away. So we had 60 hours of wind. The wind died off, and it's like, well, where do we start now? There was that much devastation. I've never seen anything like it in my whole career. It was just outstanding. The trees and road slips and everything, and it's like, well, we've got to try and coordinate that. So where do we start? And that's like, okay, we've got to go and patrol all the feeders, get all the jobs organised, start the crews off. You've got to look at fatigue management, safety, and all that sort of stuff. So it was really challenging, but to the credit of all the workers out there, we were 2 to 3 weeks before we got the last customers back on. And no major incidents, a couple of strains and sprains, and that was pretty much it. So the guys did really well.
Wow. Okay, now Sam, I've spent a fair amount of time in Calgary. Wow, you get January, February. I don't know. That's a little hard for me. What's a typical good day and a typical bad day in Alberta?
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar. The standards might change and the voltage might change and the equipment a little bit, but I feel like a typical day might be quite similar for all of us. Getting things ready, getting in the truck, getting your material, going out to do your job. Hopefully, it's a nice day and there's a few laughs usually. And yeah, that's a normal day. We do a lot of recons, so we change a lot of old wire in Calgary right now, and that seems to be like a typical day in our overhead distribution. A bad day is pretty much exactly like what you said. It can get really cold here. We're just kind of starting to get a little bit nicer here, which is good. We had a long winter. So yeah, -30 with the wind chill could be up to -40 maybe sometimes. And having to do something out in that or climb a pole out in that is, it's not the best day, but we'll live to tell the tale.
Yeah. How about you, Sarah? What's a typical okay day and a typical all bells day?
Yeah, it's pretty much about the same. But we'll get together with the crews in the morning. It's all face to face, which is really nice. Even COVID came through, we were all here meeting, face to face outside, trying to figure things out, how to continue our job safely, because people need electricity, and there's no way to do the type of work remote. So come in the office, make sure that the books are put together, you talk to the crews, review the job, explain if they have details, If it's a really high construction area, making sure that you communicate with whoever the on-site foreman is to ensure that any trucks or equipment is moved from the area that we would need access to. So a lot of coordination pieces depending on the size of the projects that are assigned for the day. Then you actually can have kind of an in-between good and horrible, it's just okay kind of day. So, you know, a trash truck comes through, it forgets to put its arm down, either pulls down a span of wire, pulls down a couple poles, and now you've got to lift and shift. So, you know, that's a call that I'll get as one of the field supervisors from our dispatch center. We've got this pull down in this area. This many customers are out. You know, do you have a crew that's available? And then it's all a lift and shift. You know, is anyone on a breakaway job? What can we kind of wrap up and get resources over to this location? So things like that are the in-between kind of days. And then, yeah, for storm, which could be anything between, you talk to customers and they think storm and they're like, oh, snow in New England. But you also could have a wind event, like we were talking about the cyclones in Australia, or New Zealand, excuse me. You could have rain, a combination. Any of these things can cause unplanned, you know, outage. So during times like that, we staff here. So we'll keep crews on, maybe past the regular working hours to try to be prepared to combat any outages. And then kind of like it was discussed, just having a game plan with all the crews, knowing who's assigned to what areas so no one's crossing each other's paths, and really just focusing on communication and safety.
Yeah. Generally, have you had any typical bad days?
Okay, so just like everyone else said, we have our good days, our in between, and our bad days. So a typical good day is, you know, you're putting up a transformer and you're transferring spacer onto a new pole, you know, super clean. I guess the in between would be if you're like in a heavily traffic area, then you have to worry about, you know, pedestrian controls and all of those things. And then on a bad day would be like a couple weeks ago, a big 18-wheeler came through Somerville and took down a phone line, which then resulted in 9 poles snapping and falling down to the middle of the road. And, you know, that was quite a mess, you know, and it took many crews, all people from different area work centers to come out. And it was really a team effort to try and get those poles set and get power restored to that area.
Yeah. Okay. So now I want to move up this next question, because I want to talk about the risk and the dangers that you have to have ever present. And you may or may not know that the biggest book, the most popular book and most popular movie in the 1930s was about the risks of linemen and the heroism of them, called Slim. So going to you first, Richard, is talk about the fact that you're working with a lot of risk and danger that everyone has to be aware of and take extra precautions for. Richard, talk about that, you know, from New Zealand, but anywhere actually.
Yeah, I suppose the biggest risk for us now is electricity. You know, we work in the electricity industry, but it is the biggest risk, especially now that people are looking at introducing more solar energy and all that sort of stuff. So there's always the case where the customers can feed back into the network. So if guys are not doing their testing properly or they're not earthing properly, then there's always that risk. It's becoming more and more prevalent now, like I say, with all the introduction of solar. Traffic is a big risk in New Zealand, and it's quite a big cost for us as contractors now. Yeah, our roads are just getting crazy now. Believe it or not, little New Zealand, but yeah, it's one of the biggest costs on our jobs over here. You know, climbing, working at height, using machinery. You know, it's quite a risky industry. But on the flip side of that, we get trained pretty much to mitigate our risks and introduce, you know, methods of reducing the risks. So, you know, when I first started to what it is now, it's a lot different. Absolutely. We did things a whole lot different way back in the early or the late 80s to 90s.
So Sam, talk about the safety, always having safety in mind. And, if there's a mistake, it could be, someone maybe doesn't go home that day. What about, go to that.
I think like complacency can be a big hazard in our industry. Just for us in particular, you do generally the same thing a lot of the times. Maybe the location's changed, the weather's changed, some different things have changed. But I think complacency can be a big one. It's a huge risk. Everything is a huge risk, like exactly like we said before with electricity and everything. But when you're doing it all the time, you definitely maybe you don't think of it as much as you did when you first touched a live line comparative to like the 100th time you've touched it. So I think complacency is a big piece to that, and always remembering that like just because we do this all the time, it doesn't make it less hazardous. Like we have our hazard awareness could go up or down, but I think that's a big one. And communication for sure. I think that's probably, we can all agree to like one of the biggest parts about our job, especially when we're working with electricity. If we're doing something, you're definitely going to know that I'm touching this, and I'm definitely going to know that you're off of this. And just always having communication and being able to trust your bucket partner and person next to you or on the pole. Having that trust and communication, I think, is probably the key to most hazard mitigation.
Yeah. How about you now, Sarah? You're from Navy, and one of the reasons why the industry so loves to have people from Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Army is because they're pretty good at the teamwork and the focus on safety. So what's your take on this and dealing with those risks and making sure that everybody is safe, including customers too that are around?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a process and a procedure for everything. There's PPE that is very specific, for line work, and every single piece of that PPE is critical. It's critical that it's in good working condition. For anything that needs to be, checked after certain periods, that those are inspected on time, swapped out if you see any sort of damage or something that's not quite right. So, those are the things that keep people safe on top of what's already been discussed, which is the communication, knowing what's energized, what's de-energized. It makes a big difference, and making sure that everyone on the team kind of understands the full scope of the job. So again, they're aware of what's going on, because if you know the whole scope, then you can be that much more helpful in pointing out any sort of risk ahead of time, or early identification, asking the question to whoever the crew lead is. But everyone wants to go home at the end of the day to their family, to their pets, to their garden. So, whatever it is, people want to do the job. They want to do it safely. We want to make the customers happy and go home and then do it all over again.
Jerry, how do you think about the risk and safety? How do you think about this?
Well, I think it's very important to be attentive and take your work seriously. Mistakes are inevitable, but something that I try to encourage is to have a candid conversation about our experiences, within our team. If we can all learn from each other, the good, the bad, the ugly, then we can learn something and maybe avoid a mistake in the future. We don't talk about it often, but emotional maturity is an important part of the job. So if we have these conversations, if we learn from one another, then I think that will help mitigate any risks associated with the job. Yeah.
Now, one of the topics that comes up all the time about the workforce overall of utilities, but the frontline workers in particular, is attracting new people. And you got too many people that are old like me that are retiring out, and how to attract them. And these days, a lot of people are used to being in offices and looking at their phones all the time. So Richard first is talk about the demographics and the changing demographics of the people that you work with, and the, you know, how to attract and keep the younger people in, you know, where they have the risk, they're outside all the time, and when the weather's bad, they're not home, they're fighting the battle.
Yeah, things have changed a little bit over here. A lot of the companies are looking to attract people from overseas. So, you know, they're doing recruitment drives in the Philippines, South Africa, Tonga, Fiji. So we are bringing a lot of foreign people over to, you know, and everybody believes New Zealand's a great place to live. So why not? We've got a training industry group here that goes out and promotes the industry. For myself, you know, I've been around a little bit now, and it's a great industry to be in. It's done well, you know, I've done well for myself, and I'm always promoting to young people that are keen to give it a crack. Yeah, it's been a great industry. Yeah, I don't know.
How about, oh, sorry.
No, you're right.
Sam, what about you? You know, it's with your job, you know, it's the pay and the benefits, the people you work with, and it's for the public, the mission. But, you know, talk about the changing demographics and how to, you know, get more people to want to do this kind of work, which is so critical.
Yeah, we're undergoing some changes here, some good positive changes, and I think the driver behind it has been we want our frontline workers and frontline crews to represent the communities that we serve. So that's kind of been like the driving factor for us, and it's easier said than done just getting the information out there, because I feel like in the industry, and maybe I don't know if it's here specific, but it's a lot of word of mouth. So your dad was a lineman, so you're a lineman, or your friend was a power system electrician, so and it's a lot of word of mouth. But we're trying to do is go into communities and get that information started earlier, so people know what line work is, and people know what the utility is, because not a lot of people know about it here. If you say what you do, they're like, oh yeah, that's a cool job, I never really thought of that. So we're trying to get people thinking about that earlier on than later.
How about you, Sarah? Do you see that up in New England and with Eversource? You know, changing demographics. I mean, it wasn't too long ago where it'd be unusual for female folks being in this kind of work. Talk about how that and trying to attract and retain enough people that are, you know, have talent and are dedicated like yourself.
Yeah, I think part of it, like Sam was saying, is just getting the word out. So Eversource has a program that you know, they put out words to different local high schools about programs where they can come in and train, and after they go through, you know, this training program, they start out as a journeyman lineman in the overhead underground, or they go to one of the metering departments. So I think it's just getting the word out to folks. I know when I was in high school, we had a career fair, but I don't recall there being many stations set up for any of the local utilities. So I think that could be something extremely helpful. One of the reasons I joined the Navy is because I didn't want a desk job. And I ran into a counter at a local career fair about joining the Navy. So I think even just having stations like that are set up with the various utility companies to spread the word and answer questions that people might have. But if you only know what you know. So sometimes I'm like, if I had gone to a fair, would I have maybe, you know, joined a little bit sooner, because it is a very exciting career path. And I think even though there are a lot of people who want desk jobs, they want to stay inside, there's, you know, the same amount of people who are looking for adventure, looking for something exciting and hands-on. They just don't know the opportunities are out there.
the reward of contributing and, so directly for the community. Jennery, how about you? How do you see, I don't know, maybe the people you see around, and how do you see that workforce, and maybe it's changing, but also trying to attract more people into this line of work?
Yeah, so similar to what everyone else has said. So I've been in the overhead as a line worker for 4.5 years, and the age difference right now is remarkable. So you have people who are my age, early 30s, early 20s, and then there's a huge age gap up to like the 50s. So I think that I know that there was a hiring freeze, but there isn't enough communication going into the inner city. So I'm from Boston. I went to a Voc school, and had I known about the EPUT program, the program that sets you up with the energy industry, I think I would have landed this job a long time ago. So I think that it's important to get out to these inner city kids in the communities and to communicate these opportunities, because once you're here, you have the job security, you have growth within the industry, and then, you feel fulfilled in the job that you do, because you're restoring power during storms, or you're working to provide safe and reliable power to your community.
Yeah. Okay. Now, this is one of my favorite questions. We're going to start again back to Richard, which is, whenever you talk to folks like yourselves, they always have one or actually a few stories where, everything, maybe they were working over Christmas, or maybe the community was so dependent upon what you were doing. It was such a, major challenge that you were able to overcome. Everybody has great stories. So Richard, just one story for now. Can you think of a time that was really tough, but maybe really rewarding in what you all were doing?
Yeah, the recent one would be just with the last storm. We were at quite a rural part of our network, and 3 or 4 big pine trees had come down, broken, I think it was about 4 poles. So a whole lot of conductor was down in the bush, and would have been probably day 15, day 16, so out without power for 15 or 16 days. And we had, I think it was about 6 crews rock up that day, and we just started getting into it, changed all the poles, reconducted. And as we're doing it, the locals are driving down the middle road, and just the happiness, and you guys are legend, you guys rock, thank goodness. And it's just, having that satisfaction that, people do appreciate what you're doing. That was pretty special for us, I think.
Yeah, that's great. There was an old saying, I'm an old guy, as you can see, they used to say, for the linemen, the first day you'd be applauded.
Yeah.
The second day they started looking a little angry. The third day they take out shotguns. But when you finally restore it, then you're the heroes. So Sam, do you have any good stories about, that were particularly rewarding that you went through?
Yeah, we had a kind of a crazy freak snowstorm here in September in 2015, and it took down a lot of trees and a lot of power line. There was like thousands of people in Calgary out of power. So NMAX was working around the clock. We were working 12 or 16-hour shifts, coming in during the days, and then there was a night shifts that were coming in during the evening to try and restore all this power. And I just remember, like, even though there was a lot of stuff going on, there was a lot of power outage and a lot of, people wondering what was going on, it was still like pretty fun to be out there. We were just with one crew the whole time for these 2 or 3 weeks. You're working 16 hours a day with each other. You're having a good time. I was an apprentice at the time, so it was kind of really beneficial for me, because I learned a lot about doing stuff on the fly and things that maybe aren't as normal as they would be in a normal day. So yeah, that's one for me that it really sticks out, that I learned a lot and definitely had some fun with the crew.
How about you, Sarah? Do you have any stories that, really a really remarkable experience at Eversource?
I've had a handful, because I've been here for about 4 years, and I've only gone through a couple of major storms, but some of the other things that we do that are equally as rewarding is just building the reliability on the system. So when you have an area that, you know, maybe has cable that's never been replaced, and, you know, gets on a list of having multiple outages, you go out there to make repairs. We had one, they're changing over some equipment, doing equipment upgrades, and it requires a lot of planned work, lots of permits. Sometimes it's planned outage work, that you really have to stick to a very firm timeline. So, you know, getting together with the crews to get that planned out, and sometimes it's, you know, a 3 series permits that last 3 weeks at various times, and it's one of those things that goes unseen. But at the end of the day, you add that reliability to those customers, and, you know, now maybe they won't see outages as much. And it's something that I think could be taken for granted because it is unseen, but it is happening. System upgrades take place, and it just adds to the reliability, upgrading equipment, switches that are radio controlled to help minimize outages. So all of those things are going on kind of behind the scenes that I think, you know, customers might not see, but their outages that they do experience are going to be on a smaller scale because of it.
Yeah, this grid hardening, it's amazing the impact, and, you know, they say resilient, to make that grid more resilient so that the work is a little less after those tough storms. Jenny, how about you? Do you have any stories of things that were, you know, you really, when you finally got home after maybe a few days, it's like, wow.
Yeah, so one of the most memorable experiences that I had here was back in August of 2020. We had a major hurricane here in Massachusetts, but Connecticut was hit the hardest. So they sent all of us that work in Eastern Mass down to Connecticut. We were down there for a week. There were 500,000 without power. So obviously the customers were upset, but, you know, it was summer. We were having a great time. You know, there's 10 trucks down one road. It's all of us working, you know, picking up phases. And yeah, it was just rewarding, you know, for us to be working on that road. And then, you know, customers are driving down the street, beeping the horn, yelling, thank you, bringing us water, bringing us snacks. Like, you know, it was really rewarding to be out there working and helping these people get back to their normal lives.
Okay, so now we want to delve in a little bit about each of you. Richard, you're first. What was your timeline? How did you actually get into this? And then how did you kind of progress in your job? How does it work? Most people watching this, they don't really know how it works.
So my start was I found out about the powerboard through a friend of the family. So I rocked up down to the powerboard. I think I was about 17 at the time, and went in and, you know, asked them if there's any jobs. And at that stage, that they hadn't had any jobs, so they sent me away. And then 6 weeks later, I got a phone call saying, "Oh, yeah, come in and we'll sign you up." So I signed up, and in those days it was the old we were White electric powerboard, so it was a powerboard. You started as a cable layer, and so I was 18 months as a cable layer. In those days, you couldn't become a registered line mechanic until you were 19. So, you know, I did a bit of time on the underground first. I think it was about 18 months, and then I became a trainee line mechanic. So our apprenticeship for line mechanics is 2 years over here. So did 2 years. I think would have been 89, 90 where I became a line mechanic. In those days, you know, the old powerboard, it was really hard to get promoted because, you know, powerboard, not many people left. There wasn't the turnover of staff. And then fortunately, I got a leading hand role as a tree cutting, on a tree cutting crew. So it was 2-man crew, trimming trees. So I did that for a little while. And then the mid-90s, we started live line work. So in New Zealand, we didn't do hot stick or glove and barrow work. and yeah, that was reintroduced in the early 90s. So I applied for a role in the hot sticking, and because I was way down in the queue, didn't get accepted. So an opportunity came up to go to a contracting company. So I spent 2 years with a contracting company, and that was a real experience. From a powerboard where you had all the gear and all the equipment, and going to a contracting company, and yeah, it was a really big shift, and especially in those early days. From there, I ended up getting a job back at the powerboard. While I was at the contracting company, I got trained in live line and hot stick. So as soon as the powerboard found out that I was trained, they approached me and offered me a job back. So from there, I went on to glove and barrier foreman, like we talked about before. And would have been 2003, I think. Got an opportunity to go in as a project manager. And then 2004, an opportunity came up to be in the training school. So I spent 7 years at the training school, and which was owned by Vector. And at that stage, Vector got out of the training side of the business, and I've been back in at Vector doing our field assessment and delivery assessor role since then.
Yeah, it really came out that time that year. You don't have a Brooklyn accent, I could tell.
No, that's for sure.
Okay, Sam, what's your story?
My story is fairly similar. I moved to Calgary from a different province. I had a friend that was working here that said you need to work in the utility, and I was like, no, I think I was making $10 an hour in my hometown. I'm like, no, I'm doing pretty good, man. Don't worry about me. He's like, no, you need to come and get a job here with the utility. I was like, okay. So came down, started as labor. Like I said, it kind of feel like it was the same thing. We did a lot of digging, a lot of building pipe down in our network system, and a lot of pulling cable and stuff. Then we have tryouts here to become a power line technician. One of the guys I was working with just said we should try out. I had no idea what a power line technician was. So yeah, we got it together, and started. We have a 4-year apprenticeship here in Alberta. So go through the 4-year apprenticeship, do the school. We kind of have a good benefit here at NMAX. We have a lot of different types of work. So we have a network system that we can work in, distribution, new services, trouble, all these different kind of areas and departments at NMAX. So as an apprentice, you get to rotate through each of those departments and kind of have a bit of time everywhere. And it seems to be a pretty well-rounded way of doing it. So when you come out as a PLT, you have a bit of well-rounded exposure in each area, and you can kind of see what one you liked and maybe head towards there. And then, yeah, I wasn't in the field on the crews for very long. I got an opportunity to get into training as well and start doing something with the apprenticeship. So now I look after kind of the hiring, those tryouts, and the training of the apprentices through their 4 years.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Sarah, there's a lot of people watching this, including EI. It's a strong supporter of the veterans and energy. So we all want to know first what you did in Navy, and then we'll hear a little of your story.
So I was a surface warfare officer in the Navy, and I was stationed in San Diego. So life was pretty tough, right on the water, sunny and 75 every day. So I did back-to-back tours there. My first ship was an LHD. Number 2, it was Essex, so marine transport. So I rotated through with driving the ship with my other shipmates. And then on my second tour, I was on a destroyer, DDG-69, the Milius, as the fire control officer. So spent a lot of time down in the combat weapon system, combat suite, standing watch, and having a good time. But I did 7 years, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm ready to try something else. So wasn't quite sure what I could use that skill set for. I'm a ship driver, so what should I do? So I ended up using a recruiter through the Navy, and I just told him, look, I have no idea what I want to do. I'm looking for small group leadership, fast-paced environment, something outside, show me what my options are. And, they provided a huge list, lots of different project management jobs. You read the description and you're like, I don't think that's really for me. And eventually the one-page flyer they sent me for Eversource, I read it over and I just remember thinking to myself, I've got some transferable skills, They talked about Storm, about, again, that fast-paced, ever-changing environment, and being able to react quickly to new challenges that were unplanned. So, I went through the interview process and landed at Eversource, and that's how it all started. But I always think, I'm like, man, if someone had said something to me in high school, would I have just gone straight in as a lineman? So I really do look forward to seeing what the future has for, the younger generation that's going to start coming up the ranks.
And Jennery, you're a Boston girl, right? I want to hear about your story.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I went to a Vogue school, did the whole college thing, office job, not for me. I love to work with my hands. I love building things. And I tried to get into Eversource about 7 years ago. It was really hard to get in from the outside. And so what I did was I went through the call center. So I know how to deal with customers. So whenever there's a customer issue out in the field, I'm the person that talks to them. So I went through the call center and then I applied for underground and overhead, and then both were offered to me. And I spoke to my uncle who works in the energy industry down in Florida. And the advice that he gave me was if you want a job where you can apply anywhere in the nation and maybe in the world, then the overhead is for you, so maybe I won't have to be in Boston for the rest of my life, even though I love it here. My family's here. But anyways, so I took the overhead position, line worker position. And our program is 4.5 years long. So you're a grade C for 1 year, and also it's automatic progression. So you're a grade C for a year, which means you work less than 600 volts. And then you do a grade B for 1.5 years. And then grade A for 2 years. And then after you take a test, you become a rated hot sticker. So as of March, I'm a rated hot sticker, and honestly, it's been great.
Great. Well, I'm a little worried though, because Richard, hearing this, he's going to probably reach out to you and get you to go to New Zealand. So
I don't mind. I'll relocate.
Okay, I'm going to get in trouble with Eversource. Okay, let's wind this up with, I have a question, which is, when your family or your relatives, they say, what do you do? Really? You're dealing with 13 kilovolts or whatever, and you're out in the storms and stuff. What do you tell them about why you do what you do? Richard, you're first. This is the last word.
Why we do what we do? I don't know. I mean, for me, getting into the industry and just starting off, it's like I've said before, it's been really good for me. And I've been a lot of places. I've traveled Korea and Australia, and just with things to do with the industry, and I just enjoy it. Working up poles. It's just, I don't know if I could do anything else.
Yeah, it's amazing that that you hear this from everyone. It's risk. It's tough. There's risks. It's tremendous inconvenience, often on holidays. But everyone says how much they love it. Okay, Sam, what about you? So, what do you tell your when your relatives or friends look cross-eyed and say, what do you do? Really? Why?
I think it's the camaraderie with the crews. And I find it really cool how, we can be joking around, goofing around on the ground, having a good time, and then a flip goes the switch, no pun intended, and you get up in the air and you kind of switch into work mode, and then it's, you're serious, you're doing your work, communicating with each other, and there's, everybody has each other's back, and it just switches when you're up in the air, or when you're doing any kind of live line work or hazardous work. And then when you come back down, it starts over again, and you kind of decompress, and you're, there's some levity to it. So I like that switch. You can have fun, but when it comes time for you to be serious, you can be serious too.
Okay, now Sarah, maybe your relatives and friends already had their doubts about you because you were on a destroyer, and it's like, okay, what's next for her? But what do you tell people about why you do this?
Yeah, they already know that I'm a little bit screw loose in the head, but honestly, it's kind of the same reason I joined the Navy. I wanted to do something that would help people, that would benefit the communities. So when I was getting out of the Navy, I was kind of looking for something that had that aspect to it as well. And again, I never would have considered a utility until the paper was put right in front of my face. And I just remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like, why didn't I think of this before? And there's just so many other benefits too. When you look at job security, everyone needs electricity in every location, kind of like Janeri was saying. If you have to move because of whatever reason, you always can look for a job in a different location based on what's going on with your life. So probably the ability to kind of take that, what and take it anywhere, and that wherever you take that, you're going to be helping others.
Janeri, last word. You must have friends that say, really? You do what? Really?
Yeah.
What do you say?
I get that a lot. Honestly, this job makes me feel alive. Like, when I'm up in the bucket and I'm working, there's nothing else on my mind. I'm focused on what I'm doing. It's the most clear-headed I ever am is when I'm up in the bucket. And it just feels so good to do what I'm doing, to build things, to, say, hey, how are we going to accomplish this today? And then come up with a way to do it. It's mentally and physically challenging, which I love. Obviously, the job security is key also, and for me, like, feeling a sense of purpose, that purpose being, people rely on us. If it wasn't for us, like, how would you have electricity in your home, during storms, or, even when little things happen and you lose power? We're the ones that are doing it. So it gives me that sense of purpose, which I love. And, so that's what I tell them. And that's my honest response.
It was an honor for me to be doing this with you and telling a little bit of your story. Speaking on behalf of New Zealanders, Canadians, Americans, and actually communities anywhere around the globe, we love you all. We love linemen. We love line women. We love you, and we're so thankful that you're out there getting our electricity put back and kept back. So thank you very much. You all do well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.